All of the idols are devils, and good, in quotation marks, is really evil. Morals are already vices, and our so-called vices aren't so bad. These are corollaries that we may derive from the writing of Nietzsche. This is the first video in the series in which I will be lecturing on Zur Genealogie der Moral, Eine Streitschrift, translated usually as On the Genealogy of Morals, or On the Genealogy of Morality, a Polemic by Friedrich Nietzsche, published in 1887. My name is Joseph Suglia, Suglia. So this is the very opening of the preface, paragraph 1. We are unknown to ourselves, we knowers. Wir sind uns unbekannt, wir Erkennenden. That is to say, the core of the human beast goes beyond the perceptual scope of the human beast. The essence of the human beast is inaccessible to the human beast. No one knows oneself. No one knows oneself. But free spirits are the ones who know that they do not know themselves. Consciousness is only a part of the mind. It is not the entire mind. Indeed, the preponderance of all mental activity is unconscious. The I, the ego, is an illusion. The ego, which is the self-preserving idealization of the self, is an illusion. What I think that I am is not what I actually am, right? I might tell myself that I am unconditionally compassionate, but I might not be unconditionally compassionate. The core of my selfhood is inaccessible to myself. We are all strangers to ourselves, for the core of the human animal is the unconscious mind. Now, in paragraph 3 of the preface, Nietzsche tells us that as a 13-year-old schoolboy, he playfully described God to be the father of evil in a schoolboy writing exercise. But later he tells us he learned that good and evil are inventions. They are fabrications. They are human concepts that are not prescribed and pre-inscribed in the world by the divine. Let me quote the text. So let me quote. Nietzsche writes, I no longer searched for the origin of evil beyond the world. Beyond there is italicized. Ich suchte nicht mehr den Ursprung des Bösen hinter der Welt. So Nietzsche a priori, right? Nietzsche's a priori axiom, his absolute premise and presupposition is that good and evil are not objectively given in the world. Now, there are those who are stuck at this stage and believe because of inherited faiths which they cannot disinherit, that good and evil are not confabulations, but are objectively real. Nietzsche, of course, does not believe this at all, and this is his point of departure. So good and evil are much like general customs. So offering water to guests in one's home is a general custom in certain places of the world. In India and Pakistan, right, water is offered to guests. But in Pakistan, children give garlands to guests who pass over the threshold of their home. Just as not every culture offers garlands to visitors, not every good is a good for every culture. So, for example, suicide in ancient Rome was considered to be an act of the noble and therefore was a good. But we prohibit suicide These days, we prohibit suicide and consider it an evil. So this book seeks to answer two questions that English psychologists never pose or pursue, two questions which German psychologists never pose or pursue, including Paul Ray, Nietzsche's former friend and current enemy, the man who absconded with the woman Nietzsche fell in love with. Paul Ray and Nietzsche had a falling out circa 1882 over the woman they both loved or lusted after, Lou Andreas Salome. 1 year after Nietzsche died, Paul Ray went hiking in the Swiss Alps, precipitated from a slippery precipice, and tumbled into a gorge, tumbled into the gulch, and died. In any event, this book seeks to answer two questions. Number one, where do moral concepts such as good and evil come from? Number two, what is the value of moral concepts? What is their value? Where do they come from? What is their value? In other words, do moral concepts such as good and evil promote life? Do they intensify life? Do they enhance the impulse towards life? Or are these concepts that are anti-life? Would we be better off without these concepts? Again, would we be better off disinheriting these concepts, discarding them? Should we dispense with these concepts altogether and think in different categories, in a different language, right? Now, the second question, right? What are the values of these concepts? What is the value of the concepts good and evil? The second question puts Nietzsche in close proximity to Aristotle, who believed that what is moral is what promotes human flourishing, oidaimonia. Paragraph 5 of the preface, Nietzsche takes a distance again from the morality of pity. Now, Schopenhauer believed that the fundamental proposition of all morality in his 1840 essay on the foundations of morality is hurt no one and help others whenever you can. Hurt no one and help others whenever you can. That was Schopenhauer. And most people seem to believe this too. Schopenhauer also regarded pity as the fundamental affect with an A, of morality. Now, Kant, just parenthetically, Kant thought it was respect. Anyway, now this terrible translation, if you read the terrible translation by Cambridge University Press, renders the word Mitleid as compassion. The correct translation is not compassion. It is pity. That is how I am translating the word Mitleid, pity, as pity. So let's talk about pity for a moment, because Nietzsche's critique of pity is central to this discussion. So what's wrong with pity exactly? Isn't pity a good thing? Why does it make no sense to make pity the basis of moral judgments? Well, to begin with, asserting one's superiority over other human beings is a form of cruelty, isn't it? If you pity someone, you are implying in a sanctimonious way that the person you pity is beneath you. We don't pity our equals. We don't pity our equals. We don't pity those we consider to be equal to us, do we? No. We pity those we consider to be subjacent to us, inferior to us, below our level. We pity wounded dogs, wounded cats, college professors, organisms we think are worthy of our pity and who are therefore not even powerful enough to wound us. They're not even powerful enough to hurt us. That's why we pity them. The pitiful are incapable of hurting us. They are regarded as being unworthy of becoming our adversaries. Those who are pitied are viewed as undignified by those who think of themselves as dignified enough to bestow pity. I'm powerful because I am powerful enough to bestow pity. And if you have the ability to bestow pity, you also have the ability to withhold pity, to draw it back, right? Or to revoke pity. If you have the power to give pity, you have the power to revoke pity, to countermand pity, to rescind pity, withdraw it, right? So hurt no one, nimenem lede. That's what it is, nimenem lede, hurt no one. Well, that sounds good on the surface, doesn't it? But if you pity someone, you are hurting the person you are pitying. And the person who is being pitied probably knows it. It is insulting to be pitied. Even worse, the pitier takes pleasure in pitying the pitiful, right? The pitier takes pleasure in pitying the pitiful. Now, Kant has a different problem with making pity the basis of morality. This is Kant now. Now, Nietzsche cites Kant as a philosopher, and Nietzsche is citing Kant approvingly here as a philosopher who thought that pity may not be the basis of morality. So according to Kant, whenever we are making moral decisions, reason must refer to itself absolutely, right? Reason must fold back upon itself. It must give itself its own law, right? It must be autonomous. Reason must be autonomous, or it cannot be rational. And if it cannot be rational, reason cannot be moral. Such is the autonomy of reason. Reason legislates independently, purely, absolutely. The affect with an A of pity is external to pure reason. So that's why Kant thought that if you want to behave in a moral way, you must not do so from pity, out of pity. So in order for any action to be moral, it must be performed without the interposition of any feeling, except for the one pure feeling, which is respect, Achtung, according to Kant. Now, again, Nietzsche will be addressing two questions in this book to return to the main point. What are the origins of the fabrications, good and evil? And he does call them fabrications. He does. That is his premise. Secondly, what is the value of the concepts good and evil? If they have any value at all, maybe they don't. Why choose good over evil? And they should be placed in quotation marks, right? Why choose good, in quotes, over evil, in quotes? Is good, in quotes, always good? Is evil, in quotes, necessarily evil? Are there cases in which what is called good is not so good? Are there cases in which evil, in quotes, is not necessarily all that evil? So I want to say this right at the beginning. Nietzsche is not a philosopher of evil. He's not Machiavelli. Nietzsche is not some Mephistopheles he's not some Satanist. Nietzsche is not some Mephistopheles who comes from the abysses of the underworld and declares, let evil be my good, as Mephistopheles does. No, Nietzsche is not evil. He is wondering from a place of disequilibrium, right? Beyond good and evil. Why are the most vigorous, life-affirming, and creative human beings nominated as evil, right? Why are the most vigorous, creative human beings of all nominated as evil? Are they necessarily evil? Why are the meekest, weakest, and the most passive called good? Are they necessarily good? Killing is wrong, most would agree, but would it have been wrong to kill Hitler before he became dictator? Is obedience to authority always an absolute good? Is obedience a universal and necessary good? Universal meaning occurring everywhere, and necessary meaning occurring at all times, right? Is it thinkable? Could it be the case that morality is preventing humankind from vaulting to and reaching its highest heights, from evolving into overhumanity, der Übermensch? is conventional morality. Is there any kind of morality other than the conventional variety? Is there any kind of morality other than the conventional variety? Is conventional morality restraining humanity in the way that the swingle tree restrains the horse? I needed some more light, so I turned on the lights. In the first essay, Nietzsche sets up a typology between two kinds of dominant morality, two moralities, usually called the master morality and the slave morality, but I'm going to translate them a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about the patrician morality, right, which is the morality of the upper classes, and there is the plebeian morality, which is the morality of the underclasses. And there's a reason why I'm doing this. It should become clear as I proceed. Anyway, the patricians, again, they are the rulers of a society, and they were historically, which is why I'm using these terms. Anyway, the plebeians are the commoners, the common people, the common run of humanity. The patricians are those who belong to the ruling classes again. They belong to the dominant and often domineering classes. They name themselves good. So good in Greek and in Roman antiquity means dignified, distinguished, distinctive, elegant, sophisticated, noble. In German, the German word really, vornehm. In paragraph 45 of Human All Too Human, a book for free spirits, Menschliches allzu Menschliches, ein Buch für Freigeister, we learn that the hierarchical class, the aristocracy, is good because it nominates itself as good. But the enemy of the good is not evil because the enemy can requite the good, right? The enemy can pay back. The villain, the enemy of the enemy. The enemy is our equal. The enemy is our equal, and therefore good, insofar as the enemy also comes from another ruling class. So the ancient Greek did not regard the Trojan, sometimes translated or pronounced as Trojan. I'll just pronounce it as Trojan, be clear. So the ancient Greek did not regard the Trojan as evil, but as good, even though the Trojan is the enemy of the ancient Greek. In the Corinthian War, the Spartans did not describe the Athenians as bad, even though the Athenians were the adversaries of the Spartans. The Spartans recognized that their Athenian adversaries were good, right? So the Spartans recognized their Athenian adversaries as good in the same way that they recognize themselves as good. They're equals, right? Aristomenes of Messenia was the supreme enemy of Sparta. But I doubt that the Spartans characterized him as bad, much less as evil. I doubt it. Aristomenes was of high stature. He was of high value. He was of high enough standing to be named the enemy of Sparta, which made him not bad, but good. I know this is difficult for us to think of because we usually think of the enemy as bad or as evil. No, the enemy back then in ancient Greece was good. The enemy, the opponent, the competitor, the rival, the adversary is good because he or she is our equal. What was considered bad in Greek antiquity was whatever or whoever was regarded as lowly, contemptible, dust under the feet of the hierarchical ruling classes. The plebeians were considered bad, right? The poor, the slaves were considered bad because they were ignoble, low, undistinguished, servile, undistinctive, unfordig. For the first time in my brief YouTube career, I'm going to deploy a visual aid, so stay tuned. I will deploy a visual aid. Well, I hope you can see my screen. So there are a number of German phrases here. Sie kleiden sich schlicht. Sie kleiden sich schlicht means they dress simply. They dress plainly. They dress modestly. They dress in a homely manner or in a humble manner, right? Now, there's another sentence that sounds very much like the first. Sie kleiden sich schlecht. They dress badly. Schlicht, schlecht. You see how the word in German for homely sounds a lot like the word for bad. That's bad English, excuse me. The word for in German for homely sounds very much like the word for bad. Sie sprechen schlicht means they speak simply, they speak plainly, they speak modestly, they speak humbly. But if you say in German, Sie sprechen schlecht, that means they speak badly. So again, schlicht sounds like schlecht. The word for humble sounds like bad. Schlicht, plain, modest, unassuming, unadorned, unembellished, is etymologically related to schlecht, bad. Now, Nietzsche also mentions schlechtig, which means plainly, and schlechterdings, simply, but he does not mention schlechthin as such per se as it is for some reason. But let me come back to the main area. Okay, so let me come back to this. The aristocracy will be replaced by the priestly caste, by the clerical class, the clerisy, right? Sometimes called the clergy, right? So the aristocracy will be replaced by the clergy, the clerisy, basically. Nietzsche does not specifically name Byzantium, but I surmise that he is thinking partly of Byzantium, which was rechristened by the Emperor Pope Constantine in the year of 330 before the Christian era. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. 330 of the Christian era as Nova Roma, the new Rome. Byzantium was the new Rome. It was a theocratic, Caesaro-papistic state, a state in which religion and politics were one. Arguably, the priest is the most significant figure in this book. The book begins with a priest and it ends with a priest, approximately speaking. Again, this book begins with a priest and it ends with a priest. The priest is the one who transforms the previous morality. What is good becomes evil, and what is bad becomes good. What is good becomes evil, what is bad becomes good. The sneering unconcertedness of the patrician, right? The insouciance of the patrician, the blithe, ironic indifference, the insouciance of the patrician, the worldliness of the patrician, the absolute flaminess of the patrician, right? The blazingness, the fieriness of the patrician. All of these qualities are now decried as evil by the priest. The priest is the megaphone of the mob. The priest is the megaphone of the mob. So the patrician is hated because he or she is preponderant, right? Dominant, superior. And he or she displays one's preponderancy, one's superiority, one's sovereignty, one's majesty, one's prestigiousness, one's transcendence in relation to the plebeian. This is reason enough to hate anyone, I suppose. This is reason enough to hate anyone, I suppose. This ostentatious pretense, right? I'm sorry, that's saying the same thing twice. This ostentatious self-display of the patricians, magnificence, is reason enough for anyone to hate him or her. Now, here is a citation in which Nietzsche makes this point clear in Essay 1, paragraph 2. And I will quote this in just a moment. I don't know if you can see this, but this is my copy of Zur Genealogie der Moral, one of my copies of the book. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reading for you the text in English and in German. So let me do that right now. So here is a citation in which Nietzsche makes this point clear in Essay 1, Paragraph 2. The pathos of distinction and distance, the continuing and dominating feeling of complete and fundamental superiority of a higher ruling kind in relation to a lower kind, to those below. That is the origin of the antithesis, good and bad. Now in German, das Pathos der Vornehmheit, Distanz, das dauernde und dominierende Gesamt- und Grundgefühl einer höheren, herrschenden Art im Verhältnis zu einer niederen Art, zu einem unten, das ist der Ursprung des Gegensatzes, gut und schlecht. So the priest, fraught with hatred, hates the aristocrat, right? Hates the patrician. What is distinguished is now diabolized, as if to say, you might have worldly power, oh rich man up there, but you will be poor in the underworldly after death. And the underworldly after death. What is sophisticated, what is sophisticated, what is sophisticated, what is elegant is demonized, and what is mediocre is angelized. What is sophisticated, what is elegant is demonized, and what is mediocre is angelized. And the mediocre shall inherit the earth. The priest inverts the values of the noble classes. This is the famous Nietzschean inversion of values, also called the transvaluation of values, right? Now the common, the plebeian, the undifferentiated, and the unindividuated are valorized, and the exceptional, the patrician, the distinguished, and the individual are deposed, are pulled down. Nietzsche clearly sides with the distinguished, with the Vornehm, which he associates with creativity, with fertility, with strength, with vigorousness. Again, the distinguished, the patrician, the intelligent, the complexly minded are codified as evil with the rise of the priestly classes. And here, of course, Nietzsche is thinking of the making official, the institutionalization and the socialization of Christianity in Byzantium and henceforward. What is good today is not what was good yesterday. What is good today is not what was good yesterday. And what is good tomorrow will be different from today's good. Of course, if Nietzsche had his way, there would be neither good nor evil. We would think in different categories altogether. We would think in a different language altogether. The good are now the meek, the mediocre, the ordinary, the boring, the unintelligent, the simple, and the simple-minded simpletons. This does not mean that the common people are unintelligent. It doesn't. And that the rich are intelligent. It doesn't mean that. It does mean that unintelligence is praised as a virtue in plebeian morality, however. Why? Because there is only so much intelligence to go around. There's only so much intelligence to go around, and genius is rare. Therefore, genius cannot be held as a common virtue. No value can be common, for value is based on scarcity, right? Whatever is of value is rare. Value is based on rarity. So according to Nietzsche, most human beasts are herd beasts, right? They are people of the crowd. They are mobsters, if you like, members of the mob. Most people follow the herd. They follow the crowd. They're crowd animals. For that reason, they identify the good with the plain, the unassuming, the homely, the humble, the unremarkable, the mediocre, the boring. And again, according to the patrician, what is plain is bad. The hieratic class, hieratic, in case you don't know, the hieratic means priestly, right? H-I-E-R-A-T-I-C. The hieratic class emerges as regnant, as dominant, and with it, plebeian morality. And plebeian morality spreads across the globe. How destructive does Nietzsche think the priest is? Well, let's cite the text again directly. Let's find out exactly what Nietzsche thinks of the priest. So, who is the priest? What is the priest? Well, to cite the text directly, priests make everything more dangerous. That's not me, that's Nietzsche. Priests make everything more dangerous. Bei den Priestern wird eben alles gefährlicher. That is essay 1, paragraph 6. Priests make everything more dangerous. Why is this? Why does everything become more dangerous? Because the concept of evil comes in the world for the first time through the mediacy of the priest, through sacerdotalism. Sacerdotalism is a term that it basically is the ideology of the priest, sacerdotalism. So it was the priest who upholds, and this is a quote, that shuddering paradox of a God on the cross. That shuddering paradox of a God on the cross. Jene schauerlichen Paradoxie eines Gottes am Kreuze, as Nietzsche phrases it in book 1, paragraph 8. So it is the priest who espouses the concept of kenosis. Now, if you haven't studied Christian theology, this term might not be familiar to you, kenosis, Kenosis. What is kenosis? That is to say, it's the humanization of God, of the Christian God. It is the humanization, the finitization, and the mortalization of the Christian God, the incarnalization of God. So it's God incarnate, kenosis. This is something that Karl Barth writes about in his magisterial book, The Epistle to the Romans, which I do have here, but I'm not going to get it right now. So let's talk about this. What is the revenge of the priest? This is the revenge of the priest. The priest endorses undignified self-debasements and self-annihilations before the divine, right? So we're supposed to humiliate ourselves before transcendence. The priest endorses undignified self-debasements and self-annihilations before the divine. But this is nothing more than the attempted display of the priest's holiness. Look at how holy I am. This, again, is the revenge of the priest. Look at how holy I am. I am sanctimonious. That means, of course, I am holier than you are. You know, I can tolerate anyone who says I'm more beautiful than anybody. That's fine with me. I can tolerate anyone who says I am more intelligent than you. That's fine. I don't care. I can tolerate someone who says I know more than you. I couldn't care less. But the one thing I can't stand is when someone says or implies I'm holier than you. And I'm thinking of, I won't name them, but I'm thinking of specific people I've met in my life who sashayed through the world, espousing their holiness. And it is quite nauseating, isn't it? I don't know if you agree with me. So this is the revenge of the priest. The patrician will be from now on described as evil. I, the priest, am the holy one. You're not holy, Mr. or Mrs. Patrician, right? The revenge of the priest is the hatred of the powerless for the powerful up there. It is resentment. And this is the first time, I believe, that I have mentioned this word. Now, at American colleges and universities, and I have witnessed this, Nietzsche's phrase, man of resentment, is often garbled as man of resentment or man of resentfulness. That's not what it means. That's not what it means. Resentment does not exactly mean resentment or resentfulness. That's not really what it means. The man of resentment is not a man of resentfulness. Resentment is spiteful, envious bitterness. So, okay, fine. But what is resentment then? Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about that. What is resentment? So what is resentment? Well, resentment is a deep tarantula-like, excuse me, let me say that again. Resentment is a deep tarantula-like pathological desire for revenge on the dominating class who equate goodness to distinguishedness, right? And who equate distinguishedness to beauty and happiness, on the part of the submissive classes, on the part of the passive classes, on the part of the reactive classes. So resentment goes beyond mere grudge holding. Resentment goes beyond mere bitterness and envy. Resentment is the revengefulness of the weak, or to phrase it slightly differently, the will to exact revenge on the strong. Bang. Voici. Here it is. The person of resentment cannot let anything go. The person of resentment cannot let anything go. One's every action is a reaction to the words and the acts of the powerful, right? This is precisely what Nietzsche writes. Plebeian morality needs external stimuli in order to act at all. Quote, its action is basically a reaction. Ihre Aktion ist von Grund aus Reaktion. Ihre Aktion ist von Grund aus Reaktion. Essay 1, paragraph 10. So the person of resentment adheres to, clings to, gloms onto the it was, right? The before, the past, the used to be, one's youth, one's past life, because the before is irretrievable, isn't it? The before is irrecoverable. Before is irrecoverable. It is beyond the scope of his or her mastery. One might be able to do almost anything one pleases, but one lacks the ability to reverse or to revise or to recover one's past. One cannot alter one's youth or the errors that one made in one's youth. Now, think of very wealthy people who have everything except for youth. The person of resentment is the first one who would reject the doctrine of the eternal recurrence of the same, right? I've talked about this in other videos. That's the idea that time repeats itself eternally. In a nutshell, there's more to it than that. But the spirit of revenge comes from the feeling of impotence that we have from changing the past. The spirit of revenge comes from the feeling of impotence. That we cannot change the past. The way of emancipating oneself from the past is by joyfully affirming the past and wishing to repeat it endlessly. This is the Nietzschean categorical imperative. Act in such a way that your actions will recur eternally. That is not a quote from Nietzsche. That is my own interpretation. So let's talk more about the man of resentment. How does the man of resentment find meaning in his life? Well, the man of resentment finds his meaningfulness through those who are below him, those who are subjacent to him, inferior to him. He is the fragile, priestly type who is dependent on the strong and the sophisticated. He requires the recognition of the patrician in order to love himself. Nietzsche, through his Zarathustra, teaches us to love ourselves, right? And self-love gives meaningfulness. Self-love gives meaningfulness. And that is all that matters, ultimately, at the end of the day. Loving yourself. Now, the man of resentment seeks causes of offense in advance. The real problem is when the man of resentment turns creative, right, and invents values. That's when the problem really begins. That's the beginning of the tragedy. These values are known as virtues, right? So why do virtues exist? Virtues exist to make human beings tame, right? Virtues exist to make human beings tame, to turn them into domesticated, submissive, slavish herd beasts. Consider the virtues of obedience. Consider the virtues obedience, chastity, pity, piety. If you consider obedience, obedience exists in order to restrict the self-assertion of the self, right? And to keep people in line. Chastity is a war against one's natural impulses. And this is something I'm going to talk about later. There is a pleasure that comes from restraining one's pleasures. I'll get to that later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Chastity is a war against the impulses, our most natural impulses. Piety is the negation of the self in relation to God. Instead of learning to love oneself, one loves God and exists in a state of undignified self-debasement in relation to God, right? I'm not bashing Christianity. I'm not bashing religion. So you know, this is Nietzsche. This is not me. Self-control is also a virtue, but so is modesty, right? What are these but forms of self-minimization, right? Perhaps even forms of self-hatred. All of these, obedience, piety, chastity, are these not forms of self-hatred? They certainly are forms of self-restriction, self-restrictedness, right? Passivity, meekness, modesty, these are virtues. Virtues actively negate human self-esteem, the feeling of dignity, the feeling of one's own self-worth, human self-worth. Self-rapture is certainly not a conventional virtue, is it? To summarize, let's summarize. Patrician morality is the morality of the ironically and playfully unconcerned, right? The insouciant, the indifferent. It is the morality of the distinguished, the active, the spontaneous, the creative, the fertile, the self-sufficient, the self-subsistent, right? Plebeian morality is the morality of the passive, the dependent, the reactive, the dependently minded. Essentially, plebeian morality is the morality of the crowd, of the mob. The concept of bad is an invention of patrician morality. The concept of evil is an invention of plebeian morality. The concept of good, which is opposed to the concept of bad, is not the same concept of good, which is opposed to the concept of evil, right? This is different. Let me say that again. So the concept of good, which is opposed to the concept of bad, is not the same good, which is opposed to the concept of evil. These are two different goods, right? The concept of good, which is opposed to the concept of bad, is distinguishedness, die Vornehmheit in German. The concept of good, which is opposed to the concept of bad, is commonness, die Gemeinheit. Okay. In paragraph 13 of essay 1, Nietzsche gives us his own fable of a little lamb, which represents the man of resentment, and the raptor, the bird of prey, which represents the patrician, person of distinction. So it's a fable of the lamb and the raptor. The raptor is the bird of prey, right? So think of a lamb and a hawk. Maybe it's not a hawk, but quote the text. I'm going to quote the text in just a moment. It is not strange that the lamb should bear a grudge against the great birds of prey, but that is no reason for blaming the great birds of prey for snatching up the little lambs. And when the lambs say among themselves, these birds of prey are evil, and whoever is as far removed from being a bird of prey, who is rather its opposite, a lamb, is that lamb not good? Then there is nothing to cavil at in the setting up of this ideal, though it may also be that the birds of prey will regard it a little sneeringly, and perchance say to themselves, we bear no grudge against them, these good little lambs. We even like them. Nothing is tastier than a tender lamb. Nothing is tastier than a tender lamb. So say the birds of prey, the hawks. I don't know if they're hawks, but To quote the German, das Dilemma den großen Raubvögeln gram sind, das befremdet nicht, nur liegt darin kein Grund, es den großen Raubvögeln zu verargen, dass sie sich kleine Lämmer holen. Und wenn die Lämmer unter sich sagen, diese Raubvögel sind böse, und wer so wenig als möglich ein Raubvögel ist, vielmehr deren Gegenstück, ein Lamm, sollte der nicht gut sein, so ist an dieser Aufrichtung eines Ideals nichts auszusetzen, sei es auch, dass die Raubvögel dazu ein wenig spöttisch blicken werden und vielleicht sich sagen, wir sind ihnen gar nicht gram, diesen guten Lämmen. Wir lieben sie sogar, nichts ist schmackhafter als ein zartes Lamm. So what is the point here? What is the point of this fable? The point here, I think, is that the raptor is not responsible for its predations. Right? The bird of prey is not responsible for the fact that it is predative, right? Nor is the lamb responsible for its desire for revenge on the raptor. Both the person of resentment and the patrician are nodal points of the will to power. The will to power precedes the individuals through which it manifests itself. The will to power precedes the individuals through which it manifests itself. In other words, it is a linguistic seduction to personalize the predation. There is no reason to say that the raptor is responsible for its predations, or that the lamb is responsible for resenting the raptor. They're not responsible. The lamb is not responsible for hating the raptor, the hawk, nor is the raptor responsible for wanting to eat the lamb. The lamb is not responsible for resenting the raptor. Predation is not the deed of a subject. It is a pure doing without a doer. To elucidate what he means, Nietzsche gives us the famous example of lightning. Excuse me, but who is doing the lightninging? That's actually a word in English. When the lightning flashes, who is doing the lightninging? Lightning is an asubjective phenomenon, right? No one lightnings, right? There is no subject who is responsible for the lightning. Es blitzt. It is lightninging, right? So Nietzsche writes in Essay 1, paragraph 13, and I'm going to quote this, just exactly as the people separate the lightning from its flash and interpret the latter as a thing done, as the working of a subject, which is called lightning, so also does the popular morality separate strength from the expression of strength, as though behind the strong person there existed some indifferent neutral substratum, which enjoyed a free position as to whether or not it should express strength. But there is no substratum. There is no being behind doing, working, becoming. The doer is a mere appendage to the action. The action is everything. So in the German, ebenso nämlich wie das Volk den blitzt. Let me say that again. Ebenso nämlich wie das Volk den Blitz von seinen Leuchten trennt und letzteres als Tun, als Werkzeug, nein, als Wirkung eines Subjekts nimmt, das blitzt heißt, so trennt die Volksmoral auch die Stärke von den Äußerungen der Stärke ab, wie als ob es hinter dem Starken ein indifferentes Substrat gäbe, dem es freistünde, stärker zu äußern, oder auch nicht. Aber es gibt kein solches Substrat. Es gibt kein Sein, in quotation marks, hinter dem Tun werken werden. Der Täter ist zum Tun, bloß hinzugedichtet, das Tun ist alles. Now let me adduce my own example of a subjectless statement that is more common in English. It is raining, right? Who is doing the raining? No one. It is raining. Es regnet. Both the man of resentment and the patrician belong to the pure willing of the will to power. They are not free agents. They are not autonomous subjects. So what is the will to power? That will have to wait for another video. One of the fundamental lessons of essay 1 of On the Genealogy of Morality is that nothing on earth has ever been given its rightful name. Let me say that again. Nothing on earth has ever been given its rightful name. There you go. Well, I hope you learned. Thank you very much. This is video 1. My name is Joseph Suglia, and this is a series in which I talk about Zur Genealogie der Moral, Eine Streitschrift by Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche. And there are 2 more videos to go. And in the second video, as would be expected, I'll talk about essay 2 of this book. And then in the third video, of course, I'll discuss essay 3, which very few people ever talk about. Essay 3 is actually my favorite of the 3 essays. And essay 2 is the most challenging thing, one of the most challenging texts that Nietzsche had ever written. I don't know why this text is taught so often to undergraduates, because the second chapter is really difficult, but I'm going to make it very clear, or at least I will try to. Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Suglia, Suglia, signing out and signing off. Thank you so much.